There is a saying that it takes a village to raise a child, but personally, I always preferred the quote that it takes a library to raise a reader. For many of us, books played a pivotal role in shaping us into the people we are today. I believe there is wisdom to be found in stories, especially ones involving fantasy. The lessons I picked up from some of my favourite books helped me grow as a person, making me more empathetic to those who went through life on a different path. The fantasy genre expanded my thoughts, and for that I'm extremely grateful. I first read The Name of the Wind only a few years ago, and since devouring the book, it's stayed with me, almost like a close companion. Admittedly, the first Kingkiller novel took me a few months to read, but not because I wasn't enjoying it. Far from it. In fact, I was so impressed by the beautiful prose, and the way in which the words were woven together, that I deliberately took my time, savouring each page and every line. It was like taking sips of the best drink you've ever had, that you didn't want to finish because you're enjoying it so much. My first read through of The Name of the Wind pulled me into this epic journey of a young man, full of confidence and vigour, who for all his talent, courage and sarcasm, ends up defeated and full of regret. I was engrossed in this man's story, but it was not until my second read through that I began to pick up on things I'd earlier missed. Rereading and reliving Kvothe's tale exposed me to secrets buried in the text. I started to spot clues nestled in the little stories, poems and songs the characters shared, that many of the tales narrated were sometimes the same story, spun out and repeated again from different perspectives. The details may vary, but the essential elements were the same, and that blew me away. The more I reread, the more convinced I became that each word was meticulously chosen. In the narrative, Rothfuss writes words have power, and it's hard to argue with him. The way words are read, spoken, and listened to shapes their meaning, drives our behaviour, and ultimately morphs our understanding of the world around us. Their power arises from our emotional responses to them. Take the word fire for example. Say the word out loud during a barbecue, in a work environment, or at the cinema, and you'll get three completely different reactions. It's easy to underestimate the hold words have over us, especially when they're unconsciously used to provoke a reaction. Spend some time with a chronic complainer who is always making a fuss about something, and you might notice your mood drop from the constant negativity. This is problematic, particularly for those of us who make a habit out of repeating the same negative thoughts to ourselves. The more we hear, read, speak, or think about a word or phrase, the more power it has over us. A man who tells himself each day that he's useless will start to believe it, and this just shows how a person's internal propaganda can shape a false self-image. The Name of the Wind touches on this with Kvothe's alter ego Kote, who has created a new persona to hide his true identity by living as an innkeeper. When patrons are around, Kote is your typical hospitable barkeep, who attends to polishing his bottles and sweeping his floors, but when he's alone, he succumbs to a terrible depression. He spends much of his time dwelling on his shortcomings. He blames himself for the civil unrest in the world, and is unable to forgive himself for whatever tragedy occurred in his past. By not coming to terms with his history, he's not allowing himself to move on. So what you have here is this shell of a broken man who is stuck in an endless self-destructive spiral. When he's in public, he pretends to be someone he's not, and when he's alone, he punishes and belittles himself for being the person he once was. People saw him as an innkeeper a year ago. He took off the mask when they walked out the door. Now he sees himself as an innkeeper, and a failed one at that. You saw what he was like when Cobb and the rest came in tonight. You saw that thin shadow of a man behind the bar tonight. It used to be an act. Towards the end of The Name of the Wind, Bast explains to Chronicler that there is a fundamental connection between seeming and being. A mask is dangerous for the very reason that we all become what we pretend to be. I think there is an important lesson here, in that if we're not fully conscious of our thoughts and how we're presenting ourselves to the world, then there is a very real risk of becoming a type of person we don't necessarily want to be. One of my favourite lines from Rothfuss's first Kingkiller novel actually comes from the beginning of the book, when Kvothe is narrating about his childhood. He talks about how he picked up his skills from acrobats and actors in his travelling troupe, and even reflects on how he learned the inner workings of the royal court from a courtesan. It's at this point where he relays what his father once said to him. Call a jack, call a spade, but always call a whore a lady. Their lives are hard enough, and it never hurts to be polite. It's a simple but powerful message that basically says no matter what a person's role is in life, treat them with respect. Be polite to people unless they deserve otherwise. This line actually reminds me of a funny scene in Red Dead Redemption 2, where the gang strolls into Valentine and they meet some girls in a saloon who they start talking up. One of the girls innocently insults the main character Arthur, to which he responds, "So how much do you ladies cost anyways?" And well, I'll let the rest of the scene speak for itself.
Ain't that a nice way to talk to a lady?
Oh, I didn't know I was talking to a lady.
Excuse me.
When people lack social skills, they often come off as rude and thoughtless, which definitely had a negative impact on Arthur's chances with these particular gals. Coming back to the name of the wind, this message about politeness carries weight because it helps to establish Kvothe as a person with empathy. He's not just a red-headed killer as some tales make him out to be. He's considerate of others regardless of their profession. Judging a person solely by their occupation doesn't define who they are. There can be very valid reasons as to why someone would take up this line of work. Maybe it's due to extreme poverty, a lack of opportunity, past trauma, or perhaps because some simply don't mind doing it. Whatever the case may be, Kvothe doesn't shy at these types of women for choosing prostitution. He judges people by the quality of their character, which is why Sim is his friend and Ambrose is his enemy, despite both being noble born. One of the main draws to this novel is that Kvothe is the glue that holds it all together. He's brilliant but proud. He's a genius but can be downright stupid at times. He's bold, fearless, but also lacking in wisdom. Indeed, throughout The Name of the Wind, we have seen Kvothe act recklessly. His teacher Abenthy's monologue about a clever, thoughtless person is a rather accurate summary of Kvothe's character. Being clever and quick to pick up skills has made him something of an ace at everything as a kid, yet this has set him up for being too arrogant and impatient because of how awesome he thinks he is. A big eye-opener for me was when he attempts to persuade Arliden to help him study the magical art of naming by jumping off a roof, just because Arliden told him to. You know, it's like that age-old expression of telling someone to go jump off a cliff. It's a type of phrase that's not supposed to be taken seriously, but every now and then some stupid redhead boy comes along and actually goes through with it. And that's Kvothe's biggest problem. He overthinks things and lets his ego get the better of him, which leads him to overestimate his understanding of this situation. Kvothe had read stories about how the mythical hero Taborlin fell, but did not despair because the wind softened his fall. In his eagerness to prove himself, Kvothe confuses fantasy with reality, believing Arliden will save him by calling the wind, but instead he hits the ground hard, leaving him with 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and a dislocated shoulder. He went and did something incredibly foolish, without realizing Arliden's comment was satirical. Arliden sums it up best with this line, "Congratulations, that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Ever." This shows us how super important it is to think before we act. Kvothe's folly is an integral part to the story, and I'm quite certain we will continue to see the ripples of his reckless actions play out as we progress through the books. He's made a lot of mistakes, but despite his flaws, you still have to admire the guy for having the guts to go out into the world and pursue his goals the way he did. And this leads into the next point I want to make. Although The Name of the Wind teaches us to avoid being needlessly reckless, I believe it also carries a very important message about picking a path and following it through to the end. Time doesn't wait for anyone, and indecision will only lead to missed opportunities and regret. I know because I've struggled with indecisiveness myself, and I'll tell you right now, I'd rather lead a life that's full and interesting the way Kvothe has, than spend another day just going through the motions. That's my biggest take from The Name of the Wind. It's far better to have tried and failed than to live wondering what might have been if you did try. If we were to strip The Name of the Wind down to its bare bones, The plot is relatively simple and straightforward. It's an easy enough read for your average book lover who visits a book once before putting it away. But for those of us who return and want to take another look, the novel has been crafted so that there is more to discover on a second, third, and even fourth read through. I can't tell you how many times I've gone over the same paragraph, and I'm still thrilled to find new ideas. That, I think, is the mark of an excellent author. Rothfuss doesn't give away answers to the mysteries, but rather acknowledges the intelligence of his audience and our ability to figure things out for ourselves. Rothfuss has a lot to say about the value of stories, about how they enrich us, guide us, and inform us. Stories are laced throughout The Name of the Wind, and their importance is never downplayed. Like words and names, our stories too have power, and we must never forget that. If you happen to have a favourite quote, message, or lesson you picked up from the book, please feel free to share down in the comments. I'm planning on doing a similar video for the Wise Man's Fear next, so keep an eye out for that. As always, have a great day, and I'll catch you later.